Twitter handles at Blaine Carlson. I'm Michael Carlson. So first off, none of the views or opinions I express here are representative of my employer. Just a disclaimer. So Minecraft. What is Minecraft? Minecraft is a popular massively multiplayer online game and single-player game. It's been around for a couple of years. It's written almost entirely in Java, which is really great from a security standpoint because it's relatively easy to reverse the compilation. There's at least 31,790 public servers worldwide. I got this off of a website listing all the public web servers. There's thousands of mods, different play styles. Many servers offer in-game services for quote-unquote donations. So it'd be really cool if we could get some of those those services and items for free, right? So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. Just a quick disclaimer: all of these issues were reported to Mojang in May, and please don't use these to be evil. So MCP. MCP stands for Mod Coders Pack. It's a tool that's used by the community to develop mods for Minecraft. It's basically a set of Python scripts that decompile, make the source code pretty, and recompile the source code so that you can kind of develop for different mods for Minecraft. And we're going to be using this tool to take a look at the innards of Minecraft, how it does authentication, how it does server-side validation of input. So the first thing I looked at whenever I was starting my research is how Minecraft does its transport layer security, right? So that's kind of the very first thing. It's the easiest thing to look at whenever you're looking at a web server or a server-client relationship is kind of the transport layer. And what I found by digging into the source code is this flow that whenever the client sets up a connection to the server, you get something very similar to what TLS, like a TLS handshake. Basically, the server, whenever it boots, it generates an X509 key pair. Whenever the client connects to the server delivers the public key from the X509 key pair. The client then generates a 128-bit secure random key or value that it then submits back to the server, and then that gets used for all future communication between the client and the server. So it looks pretty good, right? I mean, this is pretty solid. This is pretty typical transport layer security flow, and it wound up being pretty good, pretty solid. So we can't really attack the transport layer directly, at least. So the next thing I looked at was the authentication. So this is the authentication flow for 1.62 was the release that was out back in May whenever I was first doing this research. And basically what happens whenever you connect to Minecraft is you first connect to the central authentication server, right? So this authserver.mojang.com. The first thing that happens is the client pings the status.mojang.com to check to see if the server's up. Then it connects to the server via TLS, submits the username and password for the Mojang account or your Minecraft account. That server returns a session ID, and then you use that session ID for future transactions for logging into individual Minecraft servers. And so what happens whenever you log into an individual game server is you submit the username and the session ID to the server. The server then proxies that to the auth server, the central auth server, and if it gets a 200 OK, then you're logged into the server, right? It checked to see that the session ID is valid for that username. So here's kind of a diagram of the flow, and sorry you can't really see that. So the first thing that happens is the client connects to the central authentication server with the username and password. Session ID gets returned. Client then sends the username and session ID to the game server. Game server proxies that, gets a 200 OK, and then the client is logged in. So what's the problem with this flow? So the trust kind of lies, you're putting a lot of trust in that game server, right? You're giving the keys to your account to the game server and trusting that it's not going to do anything bad with it. So the attack for this flow would be you run a malicious game server, right? So your target is you want to log into the target game server as that user. So you set up a malicious game server, you trick the user into logging into your server or get them to log into your server legitimately. And then you steal that username and session ID that they submitted to you and resubmit it to a target game server. And then you're logged in valid to the target game server as that user. And the problem that this kind of pulls out is that the session ID is not tied to an individual game server. It's tied to your entire central auth session. So Mahjong actually fixed this with the most recent release. So they changed it so now you don't submit the session ID. You just submit your username to the game server, and the game server then goes to the central authentication server. Did this user want to log into me recently? Yes. So this is the flow as it exists now. So the user logs into the central authentication server with the username and password. Session ID gets returned. The client then sends the session ID and the server ID to the central authentication server that it wants to log into, the server ID that it wants to log into. Gets back, and then it only sends the username to the game server. And then the game server sends the username and server ID to the central authentication server. If it's valid, you get 200 OK, and it returns back. And down here you can see a PCAP of what that looks like. So you have my username, the server ID, and then that gets sent to the game server. And this next line is what got sent to the central authentication server, my username, my session ID, and then at the end there would be a server ID. So it sounds like that would, it would mitigate it does mitigate the initial attack of setting up a malicious game server, but it actually made my job as an attacker much easier, right? Because now all I need to do is wait for the user to authenticate to the server that I want to log in to as them. I monitor that server. Once they log in, I just hard code their username into my client, and then submit it to the server, and it's valid, right? So this isn't a one-time authentication request. It's good for I think it was like 24 hours. So if they log into the server, and you log in as them any time in the next 24 hours, you're able to get in as that user. So it actually made the case quite a lot easier for the attacker. I don't have the session ID. I do need the client to log into the server, but it's not that hard to figure it out. So what can I do once I'm in the server? As an op, I can do all of these things, right? So I can ban users, I can de-op, I can kick, I can pardon, I can set idle timeout. I can do all these things, right? So what the typical attack flow would be is you wait for an op to log into a server. You then log in as that user, de-op op your username, de-op the victim's username, and then they're basically host. They can't admin the server anymore. So that was the authentication attack. The next couple things I looked at, it's actually most things are handled server-side as far as damage and managing the server, but there are a couple things that are kind of relies on the client to do. And one of them is flying and speed. So it relies on the client to enforce a limit on whether or not it can fly and whether or not how fast it can move. There is a server-side check for this, for speed, especially flight speed, but it only checks every like 4 seconds. So what you can do is, if you log into a Minecraft server, you can fly for 4 seconds, drop, fly for 4 seconds, drop, fly for 4 seconds, drop. And you can set the flight speed to be infinitely high as long as you kind of iterate through that. And the other thing, it doesn't ban you whenever, like if this check fails, if you, it identifies that you're moving too fast and that you're flying, it only kicks you, it doesn't ban you. So you can just re-authenticate over and over again, and there's unless an op is watching, there's not a lot you can do about it. The other thing that's bad about this is that the way Minecraft works is it generates the world as you're playing. So as you move through the world, it generates the new blocks based on a seed value. So if you set your flight speed to be high enough, you'll move so fast that it has to generate, it's trying to keep up and generate the world as you move. and you'll end up DOSing the server because it just keeps generating and generating and generating, and it can't keep up, and it actually brings down the server. I believe I can fly. Okay, so now it's time for a quick demonstration, and cross my fingers, hopefully this works. So let's first look at the source code. So this first screen, we can make it a little bigger, kind of gives you an idea of what it's doing to generate the key pair. So on boot, it creates a X509 key pair like I was talking about. It's RSA, 1024-bit, pretty solid. I mean, it's not going to be easy to attack this. So they actually did a good job on that. The next one we're going to look at is this is the source for the client to do flying and the speed. So we have get allow flying, and initially it returned just whatever the server set it to. I changed it over to just return true, so you always are allowed to fly. Again, set allow flying equals true. And then I set the flight speed. Initially it returned whatever the server set the flight speed to. I changed it to that times 10. And same here. And then walk speed as well. Went ahead and changed that. So, all right. And then let's look at, where is it? Oh, here we go. Hopefully you guys can see this. So this is what the authentication looks like. I kind of showed a little screenshot of this earlier, but so what happens initially is, so it tells the server my username. So this is the client. Whenever I'm going to go log into a server, it tells the server, the central authentication server, my username, the session I'm logging in with, and then the server ID that I'm going to log into. And then it responds with a 200 OK right here. Actually, let's see. And then there would be another step. I'm not seeing it here. Oh, it's because I filtered it. It would log into the game server and submit the username and to the game server, and then that would go out and check. Okay. So let's actually pop somebody's game session. So I've got my victim here, and he's logged into the server, right? So he's messing around. It's Prandium, right? So this guy, I'm gonna try and log in as this guy to overwrite his session. So what I've done in the source code is I've changed get username from returning whatever the session username is to a static value, Prandium. And then I set the, this is 1.6, so this is the old version, so I've also set the session ID to be that user. So we're assuming that I've already compromised this user's username and session ID with a malicious server. So I've changed those values and I've recompiled, and now if we go to the server, let's see, and I try to log in as that user, please work. There we go. So now I've just overridden that guy's session. So you can see, and my mouse goes. It kicked the other user, and now I'm logged in as him. And what I've done also is this is the malicious client, so I've also changed the flight speed, and I've set flight allow, and I've set the flight speed to times 10. So even though this is a survival server, or a server where you're not supposed to be allowed to fly, I can fly. And I'm flying ridiculously fast, right? And hopefully soon, yeah. So this is what happens whenever you get on a server and you fly when you're not supposed to. You get kicked. But if I log back in, because I'm moving so fast, it actually won't do that check. It's just going to keep trying generating new world zones, right? So I'm just flying infinitely. I'm not getting kicked. And eventually this will actually bring down the server because it'll run out of memory, or the CPU bandwidth will just go to all to hell. So, yep. As you can see, I'm still flying and still logged in. All right, so any questions? No question? Yep.
For the 1.7 authentication attack, if the person's on the server that you want to connect to, you just connect straight up and they'll kick them right out?
Yeah, there's no validation. It just submits the username, and as long as they logged in within the past 24 hours, you're authenticated.
So, I mean, if they're on now, they can always get on.
Yeah, yeah. As soon as they authenticate, you're in. There really isn't any way to get around that. So one thing, the correct way to do that obviously would be to implement like a SAML solution, right? So you have a time frame, it's locked to a specific recipient, like the server, and it's only good for a certain amount of time for a given user, and you have good solid checking in the back end. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not aware of any mods to protect against it. You definitely could. I don't see any reason why you couldn't. The problem is you need the central server to provide some way of saying that yes, this is for a given server, that this request. Without the central auth server uptaking it, it's kind of hard to do a robust solution. I imagine there's ways that you could like check to see if the user's already logged in and not allow them to log in. But yeah. Yeah.
The server does log the IP address and has a blacklist for IPs, right? So you could run an anomaly detection system based on the server log blacklist IPs.
You could do that. IP protection is kind of shaky just because it's pretty trivial anymore to get a fresh IP. You just go out to Amazon's cloud and spin up the minimum instance and proxy. And then you can log in as the op and unblacklist. So it's a tough solution, right? It's not an easy one to fix, but yeah, that would definitely be an interesting way to kind of do some mitigation.
You could also monitor file contents, so that the whitelist blacklist operates.
Yeah. I mean, you could do monitoring. You can make them so that it's harder to make those changes, for sure. Anything else? Questions? Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.